Recording in progress.
Hello guys. Now we will try to understand one more topic, which is how we can show multiple values iteratively in a component. What does that mean? For example, let us say I want to create a component called hobbies. So let me draw a diagram to show you. My component is going to be hobbies. So this is my component, which you see the drawing on the right side. And in this, I should be able to enter my hobbies. So this is the input box for hobbies, where I will enter one hobby. And then there is a add hobby button. And the moment I click on the add hobby button, it should be able to add the hobby and display the hobby below. So this is the area where I should be able to show the hobbies. For example, if right now I have added, let us say, two hobbies, that is reading and hiking. So they should be printed here like this, reading in a list, and then hiking. If I add one more hobby, it should also be visible, let us say, which is coding. So whatever the hobbies I enter here, they should be visible here down, maybe as a list or in a div element. So this is what we are trying to do right now by creating a hobby component. Let's start the drill. First thing, we will again create a function called hobby. So create a new file, save it, give it a name, give it a name, hobby.js. We'll import the use state function because we will use state variables this time. Use state from React. Next thing, let's write our function hobby. And what we are going to do is we will create now a state variable called, maybe we'll write as so component name is hobby. So I'm just thinking what should be the name. Okay, hobby value. Hobby val, and a function called set hobby val equal to use state. And now we need to understand what should be my initial value. So we can understand that the hobby should be stored in an array. So let us also define an initial value with const initial hobbies, and which is going to be an array. So let's write here as initial hobby 1, initial hobby 2. So now my initial value and state value is not a normal variable, but an array. And just to tell you, we can store arrays, objects, arrays, text, or number, whatever we want in our state variable. So I'm just now going to pass the initial hobbies array inside the use state. Okay. The next thing is we will need to return the value. So first we will write a div tag. Okay. And inside this div tag, we need to show whatever the values right now we have, initially added, which is initial hobby 1 and initial hobby 2. So now the question is, how do we iteratively show the values? That means there is one way, of course, by which I can do something like this div, and I can write here hobby val 0, that will show the first value. And I can show the second value. And of course, it is not the right way, which we understand. I can save it and then export default hobby. And if I go back to my app.js, app.js, and let me remove the student component, import the hobby component from /hobby, and let's just show it here. Good. Save it, and let us see the output. Okay, we do have some problem. So okay, the problem is that in our hobby component, I have not closed this div. I was supposed to close it, otherwise React will throw an error. And now it's working fine. Okay, so one more thing, I have to put it inside curly brace, because the rule is whenever I want to show a variable, I need to put it inside a curly brace. That we already know. Save it, and I believe we should get the value working. But of course, this is not the right solution. So what will you do instead of that is, we'll use a functionality or a function called map. So let me show you what I'm going to do instead of this regular code. I'm going to first use a map function. And if you do not know about map function, you can refer to the internet and find out what exactly is a map function. I will just show you in a very brief way what it is. So I'm just going to create a basic HTML file, maybe with the name map.html. Okay. And what effectively map does is that if I have, so this is just a plain JavaScript code I'm showing you. If I have, let us say, a hobby array with two hobby, let's say this time reading and writing. Or I can take my, I can take my, initial value here, so that we are able to relate them back. So this is my hobby. And now, if I want to use map function, so I will use hobby.map. Okay. So map function means it's going to have another function inside that. And this function is going to be called for every value of the hobby array. So this function is going to call 2 times. First for initial hobby 1, second for initial hobby 2. And here value means what? The value. And if I write comma index, this means what is the index, which is 0 and 1. So every time, so this map function basically calls the inside function as many times as many values are in the array. And for each time, it receives a value and the index. Next thing, now this map function returns a value also. So if I write updated array, this is the updated, or I can write updated hobby array. So yeah, hobby array. So what we will see is that now I will get a return value also, which is going to be the updated value. And now I can do whatever modification I want to do in this hobby. One modification I can do is this, that I can return now. And what I will do is I will add a div. Then, so let me try to use templates because it is plain JavaScript. So I'm going to write div, then val, and close the div. Yeah, close the div. So what I'm doing is that with map function, I can modify the value. So the value gets modified. And if I see my updated array using console.log of updated hobby array, let's try to run this piece of code. It's a plain JavaScript code just to show you what it is going to do. So what it does is it creates a new array with the modified value. So now if I open my console, what I see is a new array, as you can see. Yeah, you can see. But this array now has the modified value. Correct? I'm not able to get the value, which is fine, probably because it is not doing the computation. But you get the point, is that the value is modified. Maybe I can make it even more simpler. Instead of this return, I can write here val plus the index. Save it. So every time what I'm doing is okay, and the index is going to be index. Let's see if it works. So reload, and now you can see that the index value is added. So the index is added because it is 0 here, so it's not 10 actually. I can do a small modification here, plus index equal to, that would make more sense now. So now if I reload, you will see, I think something is not right. Yeah, so what do you see here now is that you see, okay, let me just shorten it and show you. Correct. So what will you see now here is that for this particular code, it is adding the value index equal to whatever the index value is there to the updated array. So the array gets modified. So that way you can modify elements of an array using the map function, right? So now, using the same fundamentals, I will try to now get my values working here. But first thing, whenever we want to add any JavaScript code, we need to use a curly brace inside our HTML. Remember that. So I've added a curly brace, and hobby val, which is the value of the hobbies in the array format, dot map. Again, write the function value. We don't need the value. We don't need the index, so we can ignore the index. Okay, we'll just write value here. If we need index, we can write index also. Next thing, we will return, but we will return a value similar to this. How? Just write here div, close the div, and instead of the hobby val, we can just write val here. Now this is going to return what? Div with the value inside that. So I will not need to repeat it here like this. And remember, inside the JavaScript, again, if there is any HTML and you want to show some value, you should again use a curly brace. Don't think that I have added a curly brace outside means I don't need to add any curly brace inside. Wherever there is an HTML, then you have to also add a curly brace, because here I'm using JavaScript inside div HTML, and then again using JavaScript inside a div by displaying the value val. That is why we need to show it 2 times. Now I can remove it because it is not needed. Save it, and let us see if the output is coming. And if I reload, yes, output is working fine. And we can see now initial hobby 1 and 2 is working fine. So that is the way in which we can show an element like div multiple times. So now we are able to show a div inside the value, which are 2 values, using our map function. It is a very standard way of showing values iteratively, which means when you want to loop the values, because we are looping the array inside a div here. And if we go here again to the console, we can even verify here. If you go to the console, ignore this error. If you go to the elements, we can see that inside the body, we have 2 divs, right? You can compare now, 2 divs, initial hobby 1 and 2, which means this div got repeated using a map function. So that is the way I can iteratively show values inside my HTML of components. So now that we understand how we can iteratively show values, let's try to now go further. Now the rest of the things are very simple. I am able to show the values. I will add now an input box, type equal to text, type equal to text, and then give it a name. Let us say maybe hobby. Yeah, and value. So Yes, so value equal to so we'll not use that technique, I believe. We can directly get it done. So I'm just thinking we need to also get this value. So either we can create a form or we can directly create one more state variable. So what we will do, we will create one more state variable called single hobby and set single hobby, which is a setter function, equal to use state and initial value default hobby. So now what we are doing, we are creating one more state variable. Why do we need this state variable? Yeah, why do we need this state variable single hobby? Well, because we want to attach it to the value here. So now I'm going to write value equal to single hobby, right? Now we know that we have attached the value, so it will not be modifiable unless I add one more function. Correct? So I'm going to add one more function called change. Yeah, change hobby. So let me write down on change equal to change hobby function. And this change of hobby function will define here function change hobby with the event object. And here we'll write set single hobby event dot target dot value. We can directly write event dot target, which will return me this input tag, and then dot value, which will return me the value that is entered by the user. So we just added all these values in one single code this time. Save it. And now let us try to see if this functionality is working. So let's open the browser and verify. So we understand now that things already have been done by us. So let's now just open the browser and see if it is working for us. So let me just open the application and let me see if I'm able to enter a value. And yes, I'm able to enter the value. Next, we need to add a button. So add a button. Add hobby. Close the button. Now, when I click on this button, I should be able to add a hobby. So I will write here on click directly on the button this time because I'm not using a form. Add hobby. Yeah. Add hobby. And now going back, let's create a function again, add hobby. Now we already know single hobby is the variable which the user has entered. We don't need to fetch it because it's available in the variable single hobby because we have attached this variable to the input. So very simple thing we will do. We will just get the value single hobby and add it into the array, right? But there is a small problem. The problem is, let me write it down for you so that you understand. The problem is that you can't directly use functions like push to add the values into the array. No. And there is a reason why. Because state, remember always, variables are immutable, which means you cannot modify them. We will understand about immutability later. You can also look out on the internet. But immutable means you cannot modify any state variable. It's similar to the example of a mobile screen. For example, if you have a cell phone, all right, and the screen of your cell phone gets damaged. Let us say this is the screen of your cell phone. And if the screen gets some issue, so this is your cell phone screen. If the screen gets damaged, then you cannot repair the screen. What will you do? Instead of repairing the screen, you will just replace the screen, right? If this is your cell phone and if your screen is damaged, you will go to the mechanic and get your screen replaced. A new screen will be there. Old screen will be thrown, which means that screen is immutable, which means you cannot modify the screen. You can only replace it. Let's understand. You cannot modify the screen. You can just replace it. So that is the same way are my state variables, which means they are immutable. You cannot modify a state variable. That is why we need these special functions. Now, in this scenario, we are going to add a new hobby to the hobby val state variable. But we cannot use push because you cannot modify it. So instead of that, what we can do? We can create a new hobby array. Let me show you. So the idea is that if I'm trying to add a new hobby to this hobby array, then I need to create a new array and then assign it to the hobby val. Let me show you with code so that you can understand it better. So I will write here new array equal to old array. What is the old array? Which is hobby val. So the old array hobby val, and how can I copy the old array? Dot 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 hobby val. This is the shortcut, which means I am able to copy the old array into the new array. Good. So this line, what it is doing? Make a new array and copy all values of hobby val array. What is the next thing after this? Well, the next thing after this is I'm going to push the new value to this array. What is the new value? The hobby that I've entered. So let me write here new array dot push, and the value is what? Value is single hobby, because this is the same value that is available in the input box. So I have now, added a new value. And the third step is I'm going to write here set single hobby and add the new array inside that. So line number 1, we understand make a new array and copy all the values. Line number 2, push the new hobby into new array variable, right? And the last thing is what? And the last thing is I'm going to write set single hobby and provide the new array value. The old value is ignored, the new array value is provided to the set single hobby. And now if I save it and I try to run it, it should work. Let me now open the browser and let me try to add a new value. Maybe this time reading. Add hobby. Okay, I do see something is messed up. So let me just see what is the problem. So it's not working. So let's just see what is the problem here. So I have added. Okay, so the moment I'm doing add set single hobby. Oh, this should not be single hobby. It should be set hobby val. So I use this function for single hobby. No, I should use the set hobby val. So I will write here again set hobby val and provide the new array. It's like the old array is ignored, a new array is created, and then it is provided to the set hobby val. Let me try it again. Let's add reading as the hobby, add hobby, and it is added here. Wonderful. You can see here it's working fine. Same maybe hiking, and it is adding the value. So every time I'm clicking on the add function here, what happens is it creates a new array with the old hobby val values and then provides it to the set hobby val function, which provides me the new values and which are automatically iterated and made available here. So this is how we can create a component where we are able to add values and also display the values in a HTML iteratively, which means looping the values. So now try to write this piece of code, guys, and let me know if you are able to get it working.